Hi everyone. In this video, we will have a look at a dynamic array solution to a problem which was proposed by Mike Graven sir, that is XLS1, in one of his YouTube videos. So in that video, he gave a very amazing Power Query solution, and he used a additional parameter of group function, that is group_kind.local. So that was really amazing and really interesting to know. So do check out that video as well, that solution as well. I will attach the link to that video in the description box as well as in the comments below. So let's first try to understand the problem, and then we will have a look at the dynamic array solution and build it step by step. So I've taken this data into another sheet, and here let's say we try to understand the problem first. So we are given with this date column and the corresponding weights. Now what we have to do is, if you see that this 300 is repeated for continuous streak, right? For continuous streak, it is there only once. So let's say we take the count here as 1. Right. Now if we move down, we could see that this 400 is repeated 3 times in a continuous streak. So in consecutive manner, the count for this particular block will become 3. Correct. Then if we move down again, 200 is only once here in a continuous streak, right? We have to look for continuous streaks basically. And then similarly, if we move down, you can see that this 200 is repeated 2 times, let's say. So we would write all these count here, right, for these blocks. And let's say for this 200 block, we would write the count as 2. Then if we move down, you can see that 300 is again 2 times here, so we would write 2. And similarly, as you can see, if we move down, we have to look for continuous streaks in the blocks, right? So you can see that this 300 is repeated 4 times in a continuous streak. So likewise, we have to look for this particular count, right? How many times this has been repeated in a continuous streak. And what we have to do is we have to basically filter the data, filter this particular table where the count of this block is 3 or greater than 3. So as per our criteria, this particular block will be filtered in our data, right? Will come in our filtered data. And this particular block should also come, because these are the only two instances where the count of the block, right, the count of the continuous streak is greater than or equal to 3, right? The 4 in, like 4 in this case and 3 in this case. So basically we have to filter this particular data. So let's see how we can approach this particular problem using dynamic arrays. So as our first logical step, what we have to do is we have to assign some unique identifier to the elements of this particular group, let's say. And how we can identify that these items, these are the only items that belong to this group. So what is the criteria that we are going to use? We would compare this 400, this particular value, with this value, that is the one value below it. And then we would compare, let's say, this value with this value. If they are equal, then that means that they belong to a common group. Then we would compare this 400, let's say, with the value below, that is 200. If they are not equal, that means that we have moved into another group and there is a separate group, right? Transition to another group. So this would be treated as another group. Again, these are not equal. So that means that we are moving into another group. And for that, what we have to do is we would use a drop function that is recently introduced in Excel 365. So as our array parameter, we would pass this particular column values, comma, and as our first step, we would drop only first row from this column. Let's close the bracket, press enter, and we are left with these many values, right? N minus 1 values starting from the second row, correct? And then as our next step, we would again use drop function. Again, select this array, comma, as our rows parameter, we would pass -1 here. That is, we would drop the last row from this particular column. So let's close the bracket, press enter, and we are left with these many values, that is starting from first row and going until n minus 1 rows. Right. So now as you can see that it is very easy to make the comparison. We could compare this 300 and 400, right? These values. We could compare these values here. We could compare these values here. We could compare 400 and 200 here. So it's very easy to do now. The only issue will be with this first value, and we will treat that as well. So these are n minus 1 elements, but we would see a way to make these to treat this array as a element of n rows, right? So now what we would do is we would apply a comparison criteria, that is, if elements of this array are equal to the corresponding elements of this array, let's press enter, and we are left with these values, trues and false, right? Boolean logics, trues and false. Now for this first element, what we would do is we would use vstack function here. So vstack, we would vstack false right? For the first element, we would say that this is false every time. We would see the logic as well for this false in the upcoming steps. And as our array 2, we would pass this array of trues and false. Let's close the bracket, press enter, and we are left with this particular array. So if you see that this 300 was one block, so for this we are getting this false, right? Now this was another block, this block of 400, and for this the first element we are writing false here, and for rest of the elements we are writing true. Correct. Then again you would observe the pattern that if there are only single counts, we would see that there is false for all these elements. And let's say in this particular block there is 200 two times. So for the first element of this block we are getting false, and for the rest we are getting trues. Similarly here you will see, you will observe that this 300, right, for this for this block of 300s, we are getting false here, but again trues for rest of the elements, right? Rest of the elements we are getting true. So we would leverage this particular pattern. And how we would do so? So we would use a scan function for that. So equals to scan, and our initial value is, let's say, 0, right? And as our array we would pass this array of trues and false, comma, as our function we would write lambda. And let's say our current value is our previous result is x and our current value is y, right? And now let's start writing our formula. So if the current value, that is y, is true, if the current value is true, then we want the previous result, then we want x back, right? If you see that this was false, this was true, this was true. So if this is true, then we want previous value back, that is we want let's say 0 back, right? We want 0 back. But if that's not the case, what we would want, we would want x plus 1. Correct. So what it will do is for this false, it will give us x plus 1, that is 0 plus 1, 1 here. Then this is false again. So this will give 2 here. This will mark the creation of a new group. So for this 400, we will have 2 here. Then for if this is true, then we would get the previous result, that is true here again, right? Because these are these belong to the same block. So for this true, we will get 2 here. Then for this true again, we would get 2, right? For if this is x, then we would get previous result x, else x plus 1. So again this will create a grouping kind of a structure. And let's press enter and let's see the result. So as you can see that we are getting 2 for this particular block, again one for this block. And if we move down for this block of 200, right, for this block of 200, we have assigned a unique identifier, that is 9 here, right? For this particular block we have assigned a unique identifier number, that is 17 here. So we would use this particular logic, use this particular group, and filter our data based on that criteria. So as our further step, what we would do is equals to, we would find the unique IDs, right? Unique IDs, and we would use unique function and pass this as our array. So let's close the bracket, press enter, and we have got unique IDs. Now, as our next step, what we have to do, we have to see that for each of these unique IDs, what is the count basically for each of these groups, right? For each of these groups, what is the count? And based on the count, we have to filter this data. So for that, again, we would use another function, that is frequency function. Frequency function, our data array will be this array, our data array will be this array, our bins will be this array, right? The array with unique IDs, right? Let's close the bracket, press enter, and we have got our results, right? This is one value more because frequency always results one value more, one element more than the elements there in the array of bins, right? So what we would do is we would again use drop function here, comma, we have to drop the last value, that is so we would pass -1 here. Let's close the bracket, press enter, and we have got our results, that is we have got the counts basically for each of these groups. And now as our next step, what we would do is equals to, we have to filter for we have to identify the groups in which the count is greater than 3. So what we would use filter function. We would pass this as our array in which in which we have unique group identities. And as our include parameter, what we would do, we would pass this array, and we would write greater than equal to 3. Correct. Greater than equal to 3, or what we can do is we could write 2 here, right? Greater than 2. So greater than 2 will consider equals to 3 as a condition. Correct. So let's press enter, and we have got this as a result. And this is as per what we have done, what we have identified manually, that is the second group, and the 17th group. Correct. So now our next step is that we have to filter all these values collectively, right? Second group as well as 17 group. So what we would do is we would again apply match x match function here, x match, and our lookup value will be this array, right? This array of groups, comma, our lookup array will be this array. Let's close the bracket, press enter, and we have got these values. If there is no match, right, in these cases, we are getting any error, and where a match is made basically, so we are getting numbers. So we would apply a logic here, that is number, and let's close the bracket here again, and we are getting trues and false. And now we know the next step. It is and as our next step, it is very simple to filter this data with the help of filter function. So what we would do, we would use again filter function equals to filter, and pass this as our table as our parameter. Include parameter again these values of trues and false. Let's close the bracket, press enter, and we have got this as our result. And let's apply the format here, right? Let's format these as short dates, and this is our result basically. So we are getting these three values here, right? These three values and these four values, correct? So this is how we filtered. These are the steps that we applied to get to this result, and we can test this as well. If I write, let's say 300 here, right? So you can see that the streak has only two elements in this particular group. So we are not getting this as a result. And let's say let's increase our count here. Let's say so this is 200, and let's make it 200 again, and you would see that our array got expanded and we are getting 200 as well. So let's apply the format input to the complete column, and we are getting the results, and this updates instantly, right? So this was the solution. And let us do one thing more, that let's wrap all these steps inside a single let statement. So what we would do is, let's say we write equals to let, and let's define our first variable as data, right? And as our data, let's select this complete table, right, as our weight. So let's define that variable as weight, and we would pass the weight column here, right? Let's say we want to see TBL. So let's close the bracket, press enter, and we are getting the complete table as our let output, right? Now as our next step, what we would do is, let's copy this formula. Let's copy this, let's come here, and let's define our next variable as a, let's say, and let's type the formula here. Now we would use again drop function. Now these are all the adaptation of the previous steps that we applied, but we are wrapping the whole data, the whole thing, all the steps inside a single let statement. And then we could use this let statement as well to create a lambda of our own, right? So we can create a lambda, we could wrap this inside let function. So that all makes our life much easier. So we would want to drop from uh, w variable one row, and in place of this we would again copy this. Let's paste it here, and we would write -1 here, correct? This is what we did. And let's say as our result from let statement, we would write a here, correct? So we are getting these trues and false. Now this is our another array. So let's come here, let's define the next variable as b. Let's paste it here. In place of this g3 hash, let's pass this a variable again, and in return we want b variable, let's say. Similarly, we would come here again, we would copy this, right? This is just a kind of manual process, you can say. If we have applied all the steps and break down our problem into different columns, different cells, then the later steps, right, wrapping it inside let statement is not that tough, right? So as our this in place of h3 hash reference, we would pass b here, and let's say as a result we want to see c, correct? And then as our next step, again let's copy this. Again come here, let's define another variable d. Let's paste the formula. In place of h3 hash, we would pass b variable, and in place of i3 hash, we would pass c variable. And let's say we want to see d as our result from let statement. So we have done until here, right? So now we would copy this particular part, right? And in as our criteria, we would wrap all these two statements inside a single function. So let's keep it, let's paste it here. And what we would do is copy this array from here, right? Come here, and as our criteria, let's paste it here, right? As our h3 hash, again we would use b, right? B variable. And as our k3 hash, let's keep it k3 hash only. Let's come here, let's copy this again, let's copy this. And what we would do is, in place of this k3 hash, let's paste the formula. And in place of i3 hash, what we would use c variable. And in place of j3 hash, we would use d variable, right? D variable. And this is our let statement, and we are getting correct results. And as you can see that in our let statement, we don't have to select these columns, right, these values or this table multiple times, but we are referring it only once at the start, right? We have given variables for that as well, and we are getting our results. So let's delete all these steps, right? Let's delete all these columns until here. Let's format this as dates, short date, and we are done, right? We are done. Finally we are done. Let's test let's test for one more item. Let's say 500, and again 500. So this will be expanded, right? If we again write 500 here, again this will be expanded, right? We are getting 200, 500, wherever the streak is basically repeated in a block of in a block consecutive times, and greater than, and the count of that block is greater than or equal to 3. So that is our criteria, and we have done with this. We can change the criteria as well, right? We can change the criteria as well. How? In place of this 2, let's say we wish to see that wherever the block count is greater than 3, right? Greater than 3 includes the criteria that it is equal to 4 or greater than 4. So let's use this criteria, and you can see that we are getting these two blocks, right? So how much convenient this is in comparison to writing steps in different columns, because this wraps the whole thing inside a single let statement, and it makes it very convenient for us. So thanks a lot for watching this video until end. I hope you would like this video, like the concept, like the idea, and the logics that we used in this particular video. So thanks a lot for staying till end. Hope to see you in more such upcoming videos.